Welcome to Conversations with Cox and Kielseth, and to be more specific, that is filmmaker Alex Cox and myself, film curator Pablo Kielseth. Alex will join us by phone from his home in Oregon, while I sneak away from my office to call him from one of the projection booths used by the International Film Series, which has been screening foreign and independent movies at CU Boulder since 1941. We will keep our chats to about 20 minutes as we discuss whatever movie-related topics grab our fancy. Thanks for joining us.
Bangladesh, though it seems so far from where we are.
Alex, how are you?
Pablo, I'm very well, thank you. And yourself?
Good. Did you have a good camping trip? Is that what you did? You went camping?
I had a fantastic camping trip. I sent you a picture of where my truck was parked beside the John Day River, dwarfed by a huge mountain.
You know, I got that picture. It really a haunting picture. Liked it a lot, but I just recalled and I forgot to ask why you labeled it Elvis.
Oh, I'll tell you why. I had sent the same picture to Xander Schloss, the musician, and the subject line of my email to Xander was Elvis, because I was proposing that he do a version of In the Ghetto. In his own inimitable style, and then I edited and resent the email to you and Jason, but forgot to change the subject line.
Okay, well, mystery explained. Wonderful. You know, I think was it 5 or 6 years ago that we were almost exactly to the date? I think we were out in the desert of Tucson doing Tombstone Rashomon.
That's funny. And a year before that, we were probably out in the desert of Utah doing Bill the Galactic Hero in Cathedral Gorge.
The desert definitely calls your heart, doesn't it? There's something about the desert.
Yeah, and then we camped, and then you and I drove back and we camped in Goblin Valley.
Yep. Very windy.
Yeah, very windy. And also a place where there was like a tripartite arch.
Yes.
That was very cool. In Utah. Yeah.
Oh, speaking of deserts, which makes me think of Westerns, and that just makes me think of this link that you sent it to me today, and I just watched it just before I hopped on the phone with you. And it's that, I guess anyone can watch this if you get on YouTube and you do a Google search for Alex Cox at the Futurist Cinema. And this was in 2007 that it was shot, which is very apropos the discussion that I had with Todd just last week, because we were talking about movie palaces and this documentary that we had just seen about movie palaces. And in this clip that you can see at YouTube, Alex Cox at the Futurist Cinema, you walk into what was once this movie palace, and it's now I'll tell you there was one misleading bit, which I don't know if it was intentional or not, but it starts out with what I believe is some music that really one would normally attribute to Once Upon a Time in the West, right?
Oh yeah, that was my fear, was that, and then they were going to end, and then Kim Ryan, the director, was going to end it with like a clip from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly or something. But no, to her credit, she actually did go full Wild Bunch.
Well, because that's what you do. You are this in this clip. It's only 4 minutes long, and it's fun to watch. So, but you walk through this old movie palace where you saw from the balcony for the first time Sam Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch, and you credit that with almost paving the way for your filmmaking career, I believe.
And the subtitle of the piece is "Recruited by the Masons," because my grandfather was a Mason over there in Liverpool, and the manager of the Futurist theater, cinema was also one. And so he was the guy who said to my grandpa, hey, you got to tell your kid he likes films. He's got to come and see this cowboy movie we're showing now in 70 millimeter, So I got in free. To see The Wild Bunch.
You saw The Wild Bunch on 70 millimeter. And how old were you at that time?
I was like 13 years old.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, just right. Perfect.
Yeah. It's amazing that place was because obviously if anyone who checks out the clip, this whole place is beyond dilapidated. It's a marvel that you were able to even get onto the balcony. It looked like it might cave through. So was that
we were able to get in there and do a rock and roll concert as well. A Liverpool musician called Yorkie did 4 songs in there.
Really?
I and Chris Bernard, the other film director from Liverpool, and another guy, we all shot footage of this guy Yorkie doing songs in the ruins of the Futurist, and the director of that also was Kim Ryan, who did the Futurist piece. So she's like a Liverpool filmmaker.
Is that concert footage available?
I'd have to send it to you, or I can put it up online. It's sort of interesting. It's very, very funky.
Well, yeah, it's a fantastic space. I'm amazed that they let you go in there to play. I mean, when we put on a concert as a big event for the International Film Series, and we went to the Oddfellows Hall here in Boulder, and we had a bunch of rock bands, and it did actually bring down, we brought the roof down. There was like a 5 foot chunk of just ceiling that collapsed like a chandelier by the entrance, but thankfully people had left. And I can only imagine that in a dilapidated, defunct movie palace where everything already is falling apart, a concert could have been maybe a little dangerous.
There were no people in there. There was no audience. The concert was shown on video monitors outside the building.
Ah, there's the ticket.
So there was just Yorkie, an acoustic guitarist, and these 3 cameramen. And Kim in there.
Why didn't anyone do that during the pandemic? I mean, they probably did, but I mean, there's a way to put on a concert during the pandemic. Although, hopefully now we can get back to concerts. But listen, I'm yammering on here, and what I did want to say was that I wanted to give a little shout out to our good friend Chris Kerr, who gifted me with a book that is out there right now, and it's called "Shooting Midnight Cowboy: Art, Sex, Loneliness, Liberation, and the Making of a Dark Classic" by Glenn Frankel. And it's sort of, the stars sort of aligned recently for me to revisit Marathon Man, also by, Schlesinger. And of course, that was released in 1976 with Dustin Hoffman. And the reason it was fitting was because, like many other people, I basically have put, on hold all my dental appointments for it's been like a year and a half. So I was long overdue to go to the dentist. And I thought, well, here's the perfect movie to see before I go in to my dentist appointment. And also, since I got the book and I'm only like 53 pages into it, but enjoying it, very well written. And it's kind of
great.
And it's definitely flipping around between, Schlesinger and the writer of Midnight Cowboy, and James Hurley.
Hurley, wasn't he? Was he the author of the original book?
Yeah, it's based on his book. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I've read the book too, and it's interesting because the film is like, the book is in 2 parts, and it's the second part of the book, and the film is almost like a scene-by-scene adaptation of the book. It's strikingly similar to the second half of the story of Joe Buck.
Interesting. Well, this new book, Shooting Midnight Cowboy, just in the first, 53 pages, I mean, they certainly, as they go back and they talk about some British filmmaking of the 60s, of course, Lindsay Anderson, who we mentioned just a couple of weeks ago, gets quite a few mentions in there. But no, I mean, John Schlesinger's a very interesting director. He also, he did a film that we showed in my backyard on 16 millimeter, which was one that you had recommended as well, Darling from 1965. What were your thoughts on that one?
Oh, yeah. Todd and I watched that quite recently. Well, it's very good. It holds up very well. I mean, that's what I thought about Midnight Cowboy as well, is how well at least those two films hold up compared to maybe some other films from the 60s, which seem now a little arch in their style, a little bit overdone. There's a real... But not that it's just pure naturalism, because there's fantasy sequences as well. But there's a sort of a certain simplicity about Schlesinger's mise en scène that really holds up.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about, I'm actually a fan of his Day of the Locust from 1975. Do you like that one?
It has great things in it, Day of the Locust. The disaster on set when the movie set collapses in Culver City is a fantastic scene.
Yeah.
It's brilliantly done. Yeah, there's a couple of absolutely brilliant sequences in Day of the Locust.
Well, the Marathon Man, I really don't think that. I think it's just this weird film that I really, it was such a big deal when I was growing up, and I went and saw it theatrically. But then I just, for whatever reason, just didn't revisit it until just recently. And the two scenes that stood out for me this time were not the standout scenes when the first time I saw it. Obviously, the first time I saw it, there was a lot more of the sort of the espionage thriller, stuff with Roy Scheider and the, and of course the famous scene that I guess actually ended up getting cut down, because when they showed that when they showed initially the scene of Dustin Hoffman getting, drilled into his teeth, and the test audiences actually, some people got so overwhelmed that they just felt that they had to tone it back, so they cut it back a little bit.
Because the conceit of the film is that Laurence Olivier is a Nazi war criminal, and Dustin Hoffman is a crusading journalist or something, or somewhat or a revengeful Jewish guy who's like out to get him. But for some reason, he has to have his teeth extracted.
Dustin, it actually, it's a strange little movie, because I think it would actually be a good double feature, maybe with Day of the Condor or something like that, because a lot of the movie kind of gets moved along by this premise that there's these shady CIA-like organizations that are actually moving the things along, and Dustin Hoffman's character gets kind of embroiled into this situation because his brother, who is Roy Scheider, is actually involved with the CIA, and
involved with this rat line that's getting Nazis to South America or something. Yeah.
Yes. Now, and I should mention, this is we're talking. It's a script by William Goldman, who not only was he the author of Adventures in the Screen Trade, but he also did Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and All the President's Men and The Princess Bride, which is definitely a different texture. But it was based on. So he wrote the script, but it was also it was based on the book that he wrote, which was released 2 years earlier, and it ended up being his. It was his second most successful thriller, and he also wrote a sequel that I don't know anything about, called Brothers.
But you were saying that the scenes that stuck out for you when you saw it again weren't those original,
nope.
dental torture scenes. What was it that impressed you?
Yeah, the scenes that stuck out for me, it was there's a opening scene, which is where the guy that ends up being like the brother of the Nazi who will do the horrific things to Dustin's teeth, he basically gets, he has this safety deposit box, and it's like the diamonds, and he's got the key, and he gets into a car, and then he's in this car, and he's on the streets of New York City, and then he ends up sort of getting in front of and antagonizing this other fella in a car. And basically, to just cut to the quick, it's like a road rage situation. And they both end up careening through, just causing mayhem, going through traffic. But on the streets of New York City, there's no green screens. This is, you look out there and you can actually see real people, probably some of them astonished at what they're seeing. And then they both collide into this, this gas tanker truck, and it explodes.
All 70s movies were like that, weren't they? That happened in every 70s movie.
But what's interesting is that Dr. Zell's brother, the guy who collides into this, tanker truck, that guy was actually he had a stage name as a comedian and acrobat in his previous life as Ben Dova,
Huh.
and his actual name was Joseph Spa, and he's one of the survivors of the Hindenburg disaster from 1937. So it's just interesting. I can't help but wonder if Schlesinger was playing a little bit with this idea of, you know what, I'm going to take this guy who survived the Hindenburg disaster and I'm going to throw him right back into a big, plume of flame.
How funny, how weird.
But so that was the first scene. And then it ends with Dr. Zell actually kind of running down the street after he's been trying to sell, price out the diamonds that, he's killed quite a few people to get. And as he's kind of going through the streets of New York City, he gets identified as a Nazi by some of the Jewish residents of the neighborhood. And that scene where they're all people start chasing him and he's kind of getting closed in on. Again, the same thing, the immediacy of shooting on location on the busy streets where there's just a lot of things that can't possibly be anticipated, but you're seeing gritty reality. I feel sad for the fact that nowadays, I think most of the studio films that are getting released, there's so much CGI and there's no reality that's actually connecting with our neural synapses as we're watching these moments, because those two scenes were so thrilling for me, and they still definitely have punch. And and the acting, of course, all the way through is great. I don't mean to overlook that, but those two scenes were, for me, kind of bookended the movie experience.
But also about the acting, it's the origin of that famous story about actors, isn't it?
Well, specifically the whole Dustin Hoffman method acting bit, right?
Yeah. That's the film where Dustin Hoffman, who was like Actors Studio, etc., said to Laurence Olivier, who was very old school, he said I heard different versions of this, but he said something like he was thinking of going to the dentist and getting a filling without anesthetic so he would know what it felt like to be tortured by a dentist's drill. And Olivier said to him, "Dustin, dear boy, have you ever tried acting?"
You're telling me a version that I had not heard of before. The version that I'd heard was that Dustin would go run 4 miles or whatever, and then come in, huffing and puffing, and to be, to play this part of being totally exhausted and at wit's end. And that, yes. And then Olivier would just say, why not try acting? But now supposedly, right, Hoffman, I think later denied this story. And I think it was just like almost 20 years ago. He basically said that he was going through a divorce from his first wife. He was depressed. And what he'd been doing is he had just been partying. He was going out, trying to distract himself. But so he was not sleeping well. And now that being said, he does plenty of method acting all the way through the film, because like when he's being held down in the bathtub by assassins, he supposedly told them, just hold me down for as long as you want. And I'm going to try to fight my way out of this. Right. So there was.
No, don't do that. No, that's the worst actor's crime of all.
Well,
the other actors hate it when you do that.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure he didn't get some fans from some of that behavior.
I remember Richard Mazur telling me that he and Ray Sharkey had to act with Michael Moriarty in a movie where they were like the CIA kind of killers, and they were supposed to like abuse Michael Moriarty. But he like really fought with them, and Mazur said it was a miserable experience, because the last thing you don't go to work to like fucking get in a physical fight with somebody, unless you're a policeman.
Well, on the subject of method acting, I just saw HUD with Paul Newman. My first time, I was blown away. It was amazing. But I read about how Paul Newman was, he got full into the method acting bit, went to the ranch like 2-3 weeks ahead of time to bunker down and get calluses on his fingers and actually kind of figure the ropes literally and also get into his character, who was a real slime bag. And the person that he was acting against was, she had just lost a child in real life, and she was telling this to him, confiding in him as they're off scene, and he listens and he just walks up or gets up and then just says tough, and then just walks away. And she didn't realize until later that he had been in character and wasn't breaking character. So he was, and she forgave him and all that. But yeah, no, I think that would be obviously for reasons like that, it would be very rough for some of your colleagues.
Yeah, I mean, I don't sentimentalize it either, though. I mean, I think you have to be kind of grown up to, and do it properly and not let personal tragedies and sadness get in the way of the work. But I do actually think you should be able to avoid physical violence. You should be able to go to work knowing you're not going to get punched, have to fight Dustin Hoffman to stay in the bathtub.
Well, Exhibit A, by the way, in Marathon Man is the fact that Laurence Olivier himself had been given a death sentence of doctors told him he was going to die of cancer. I can't remember what kind, and that he only had a few months to live. And so he was in hyperdrive and doing as much as he could to try to, leave enough of, some money for his family, etc.
For his taxes.
But then he ended up, I guess he did all of that while he performed his role, but he was also doing his treatments for his cancer. And I'm sure that this included heavy doses of painkillers and all of that just to be able to get through the day. And in fact,
that's so interesting. How fascinating, because I heard that story about Robert Mapplethorpe as well, the photographer, that as he was dying, he was just like churning out, he was signing blank pieces of paper till the very end, and I think Salvador Dali did something similar. They're approaching the misty beyond, but just gonna see if we can get a bit more money, squeeze a bit more money out before we go, and like, what's it to them?
Well, I mean, some people are thinking about, I guess, the legacy they leave behind for others, and that might add a little extra sense of, meaning to their lives. I'm only guessing.
I guess so.
I guess so. The last thing I want to mention, though, is that in Marathon Man, there was one scene where Roy Scheider, like he knows that he's kind of being followed and that he might get killed or something. And he's going down these dark halls, and all of a sudden a soccer ball just kind of bounces from the darkness toward him. And he knows it's a bad sign. And it just made me realize that Marathon Man, I've always thought of it as a thriller, but in a way, it does have these horror film motifs. Although when I say that because it makes me think of The Red Ball and The Changeling, but The Changeling came out 4 years later in 1980. So the chronology isn't correct there, but I'm sure there's other horror films where bouncing balls just come out of the darkness or something.
Well, there's a little bouncing ball in Toby Dammit, the Fellini film.
I forgot about that. Yes, correct. Right.
That's a pretty interesting bouncing ball.
Whew.
And talking about horror environments, I want to bring you back to your movie palaces, because two of the movie palaces I've been in, the only two I can really remember are the Futurist in Liverpool, which has now been torn down, and the Chemo in Albuquerque, which, when you go in, has got these extraordinary murals and lobby decoration. It's really grandiose. But then when you go into the auditorium itself, you're surrounded by devils.
I saw the picture. That was fantastic. But could you tell me one more time the name of this place?
It's the Chemo Theater in downtown Albuquerque.
Well, could you actually spell is it
K-I-M-O?
K-I-M with an M?
K-I-M-O.
Not Kino, not K-I-N as in no.
No, Chemo, K-I-M-O.
Wow, okay. Huh.
And it's got these horned devils that look like something out of Walpurgisnacht in Fantasia.
That's exactly what I thought when I saw that picture you sent me, Alex. Exactly what and surely intentionally so, because they're like spot on. They spot on look like the devils in Fantasia. Yeah.
There's a whole story to that interior, but I don't know it well enough to be able to tell it. But about the artist who was responsible for the restoration of the interior and the devils. But it's a very interesting story.
Wow, I sense a road trip in my future at some point. Is it still around? I guess that's the first question.
Yes. Oh, it still is. I think it's a sort of now, it's a sort of treasure of Albuquerque. And also, there's a good repertory theater in Albuquerque called the Guild. So if you found yourself there, you'd be at home.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's wonderful when societies come together and recognize the historical significance of a place to protect it for future generations. Because a friend who I was talking to about movie palaces asked me if I'd ever been to the Aladdin in Denver, which was a Colfax Theater movie palace, and I think it got demolished in 1980. And sadly, I never went there. But on YouTube, you can get on and you can see it getting demolished. And what replaced it rather? A Walgreens. Just what the world needs, another Walgreens.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like in Liverpool, what replaced the Futurist when they tore it down, like some more student accommodation or who knows what, for students who won't be coming anymore, And,
yeah.
So, because it was all foreign students, it was all Chinese students who were going to the engineering school, and they're not going to be coming anymore. So, it's weird. Yeah, it's terrible when these massive, magnificent movie palaces are diminished thus. But I think at least we have, we cling to the survivors.
Yeah, well, we should, and appreciate the survivors while we can. So I'll definitely make a note of checking out Chemo in Albuquerque. And I think that's our time for today. So, Alex, I want to thank you, and I'm glad that you're back. And I look forward again to talking with you in a week.
Exactly so. I look forward to our next chat. And give my love to everybody there, and tell Jason I booked my hotel room too. So we'll see our producer and his wife to be on the 23rd of September.
And I guess we're going to make the announcement here for those who are listening, just because Jason, who does handle all of our technical needs and is very much part of our family here, he is getting married, and it's happening end of September. So. Alex and I will be there, and we look forward to joining him on his very special day. And congratulations to Jason and Crystal. So it'll be great to see you both, and it'll be great to see you, Alex, back here in Colorado. We're going to make you a special guest in the International Film Series calendar. So anyone listening to this, that we're going to have a whole weekend of films by Alex Cox on 35 millimeter and in Munzinger. So might as well go ahead.
Like Rod Stewart said, it's late September and I really should be back in school.
Bingo. All right. Well, perfect. Alex, talk to you next week.
I look forward to it. Nice talking to you.
Ciao.
And cut. Okay, that's a wrap.
Thanks again for joining Alex Cox and myself today. I'd like to thank Jason Phelps for handling the audio and Ted Thacker for letting us use the intro to his song, The Ballad of Slim Cessna, for the musical cues that bookend these conversations.
If you'd like to drop us a line with any suggestions or comments, you can send us an email at pablo@internationalfilmseries.com. That email address again is pablo@internationalfilmseries.com. And if you drop us a note, Alex and I will do our best to reply to any emails. And thanks for sending us any suggestions. We look forward to them.